All right, welcome everyone. My name's Gary Scheinman, and I'm joined here by my compatriot Mikolai Stransky, and we are the composers for the video game Metamorphosis, and we're going to talk about from Ovidworks. Yes, that's the developer, and so we're going to talk about our score, and I think it's a pretty interesting one, and I think hopefully you'll find it interesting as well. Mikolai, should we start with playing a video just as an introduction? Maybe play Letter.
By all means. Yeah, so this is I think it's the first track actually on the album. It's called The Letter. All right, so this was The Letter, the first track from the game Metamorphosis that's happening in the world of Franz Kafka, right? And Gary, you want to do an intro to that?
Yes, well, that was your music and a beautiful cue. Nice. Game Metamorphosis is based on the works of Franz Kafka, the famous writer, author in the early part of the 20th century, who wrote some very interesting and bizarre books, including Metamorphosis, of course, in which you become an insect. And in the game, you become an insect and play as an insect. But it also includes plot points from other books of his, including The Tower and others. So it's sort of a hodgepodge of Franz Kafkian storylines. Mikolai, why don't you talk about the inception, how you got hired and then invited me to be part of this scoring?
Sure. Yeah, it was about 2 or 3 years ago already. Time flies. That I was giving a lecture on video game music in Warsaw, Poland. And after the lecture, I was invited by organizers for drinks to a nearby pub, I'd say. And big part of the audience joined us. And at some point during the evening, I was approached by a group of people asking, telling me that they would like to show me their game they're working on, and asking if I would like to potentially score it. So they showed it to me on the iPhone, and that was the game. And I saw those little legs of a bug, some kind of insect. And at that point, I haven't scored any video games on insect. And I heard it's based on Kafka's literature. So those are already two very inviting points. And it looked very good actually at that point, even though it was a work in progress. And so I said, yeah, sure. If it happens, then if the game will see the light of the day, I'll gladly do it. And so, I went back to my stuff and haven't thought much of it. But then after a couple of months, they got back to me and saying they're ready with the game. And if I'm still willing to score it, I said yes. And they sent me all the materials after I signed the NDA. And I was, as I was trying to look to find a color for the music, I was, the more I tried, the more I figured that the color that really works is the symphonic palette with a strong atonal presence. And so, with this in mind, this made me really happy because this is music I love to listen, believe it or not. And at the same time, I thought, hey, I think Gary might actually enjoy it, and I wonder if he'd like to join me on this in this process. So, I emailed him from Warsaw to Los Angeles and asked and told him about the project, that it's about Kafka, it's about all this twisted world, and he said yes immediately. So it was fun.
Yeah, as soon as I heard, first of all, the thought of working with a friend, Mikolai, was very intriguing. But Franz Kafka, of course, so famous for his interesting and weird and amazing stories. I just thought it was going to be a musical opportunity, a really interesting musical opportunity, and as it turned out, it very much was. And so when I first sort of got introduced, signed my NDA and started being introduced to the material and thinking about Kafka, Kafka was born and lived and created in the period of German Expressionism, which was an early 20th century art form. And I just thought, well, here's an opportunity to do something with music that was expressionistic, which, of course, so we think of Arnold Schoenberg and Alban Berg as two exponents of that style. And with it, of course, also included a style that Schoenberg sort of did invent, which is called Sprechstimme. Sprechstimme or Sprechgesang, two German words that really mean half spoken, half sung, but it's very iconic and very much identifies that period of music in German expressionist. So that was really what intrigued me. And Mikolai, let's play Corridors. I think that's the second one on the list. That's
Okay.
one of my cues.
All right. Let's see. Please. Yeah, let's go. All right. So that was Gary's great cue called Corridors, and so Gary was assigned. It just so happened that he scored the part of the bug world that's happening underneath the floor, deep inside the insect world, and so for that reason. He used it just so happened that the style of Schoenberg really fitted it. Now my sort of color was more that of a Bernard Herrmann. So whatever you hear the cue Herrmannesque kind of cue, then it's coming from my musical mind. And so they're slightly different, yet the soundtracks sound pretty cohesive, and that's partially not only due to the similar orchestration, but also due to the themes. Now, each of us have written our own themes, one each, and then we shared them amongst each other for the sake, again, of the cohesiveness of the soundtrack. And it just so happens that due to some kind of synchronicity, we both not only took this intellectual intervallic approach to create the lines, but also, and we haven't discussed this, but also both of our teams are based strongly on the major seventh, which is interesting. It's I wonder why. I wonder because, like, the main hero of the game really wants to resolve something, as is the major seventh that really wants to resolve into an octave. I think there's something to it, and so yeah. As you heard, the lyrics in, maybe you heard, maybe not, maybe you didn't, but the lyrics are German, and the reason for the German lyrics is that Kafka world was Austro-Hungarian part of Europe, and Schoenberg was also German. He was actually German Jew, and on top of it, German language to non-German speaker, it might sound a little crazy, of course, unless you're a German, and
Kafka wrote in German. He wrote Metamorphosis in German. So it just made sense. That was just a creative decision that we made together, and you could.
It worked.
It seemed to work really nicely.
And we did have a different approach to, in case you were interested, how did we come up with lyrics? Now, my approach was slightly different than Gary's. I used the remainings of the German language that I used to know way back when and speak fairly well, but not anymore. And of course, with the help of Google Translate. Whereas Gary's technique was what? How did you come up with lyrics?
I took Franz Kafka's actual language from Metamorphosis, and I had one of my former students, Robert Wolf, who is German, take and sort of create lyrics for me. He helped me using Kafka as the source. So you're hearing Kafka's words just arranged in a way that makes sense for my particular cues. So thank you, Robert Wolf, for that assistance.
Very cool. Now,
and Kafka, of course.
Yeah, definitely. He is the main inspiration here for the music and the game. Since the world is happening in the world of, since the game is happening in the world of insects, it was very natural for us to incorporate the insect sounds into music, into the orchestration primarily. And that would be things like the plucky sounds, like pizzicato and plucked piano strings that resemble those little insect legs. And another thing would be maybe string tremolo, which is ponticello, for instance, which is resembling flying insects with insects' wings. There are some mosquito-like sounds in strings, especially in one of Gary's cues called Harbor. Little clicks on the string, and there are some percussion sounds. Now, aside from the insect-like orchestration, there are some concepts that in music that I think relate well to the world of bugs, which is the 12th-tone music. When you think of a centipede moving, it's it won't move the leg number 100 until it moves all the other ones, and it won't repeat the leg number 100 again until all the other legs have been moved. So that's kind of like 12-tone music. That's how it works. And having said that, I think we can play the next track that hopefully illustrate this, called Bugville. All right, here it comes. There's a lot of tension in our music, as you heard, and maybe Gary can say something about
Well,
it.
yeah. Now, this particular cue was not actually an example of 12 tone. This is more
Yeah.
tonal, and I would say maybe more inspired by Kurt Weill than Arnold Schoenberg, who was also an expressionist composer from that era, who famously wrote Three Penny Opera and a number of other works. And this was actually written because there was a note from the developer that said, "Don't forget." There is a lightness and there is a humor, and this, as you enter this bug village, you kind of have a humorous experiences with these other bugs communicating with you, and there's this whole life, underworld life of insects that nobody knows about. So that was that. Later, Harbor would be a better example of 12 tone, and I would say that I used a number of different styles in my score and in my work on this, including 12 tone, free atonality, some aleatoric, sort of these clusters that you hear that imitate insects, I thought, anyways, and then tonality, which you heard in that last cue and in some others. Sort of, it was just sort of a free mix of all these different styles that made sense for this really interesting Kafkaesque world. So,
Tension. Actually, what you said about harmony, there's a lot to do with tension, and also, well, I chose Arnold Schoenberg style because his harmonies also balance on tonality, somewhere between tonality and atonality. So that's the ear goes kind of, is it gonna solve? No, not quite. Which is which is a kind of vocabulary that pushes events forward in the gameplay, right? And
I think it's an interesting bit of a story because I think that Joanna's work was so fun, so important to this that we sort of mention her because so finding the right singer was critical. I hired someone in LA that I'd worked with before who's a wonderful singer, but she could not pull off this style. So I called, Mikla and said, "We've got problems." I don't know. Maybe this is not going to work. But Nikolai, go ahead. Tell us how you found it.
Yeah, at that point, right now I'm talking to you from Los Angeles, but at that point I was in my studio in Warsaw, Poland, and I thought to myself, hey, I don't have all the access to all those amazing musicians that are here in LA, but I gotta have pretty easy access to a good or even very good classical singer. And after one email, I got pointed by all my friends to Joanna Freschel, who is exceptional and specializes in this kind of alternative ways of classical singing, and she came to the studio and after a couple of takes it was a process. It took us a couple of takes, but in time the music started flourishing, and what we wanted with Gary started to come to the surface. And after I was done recording her, I was super happy, and I emailed Gary, "Hey Gary, I think we got it. Check out, I got some gold for you." And Gary was really ecstatic when he first heard it, and so was I, actually.
That was my vision initially, and it was like, oh my God, she totally nailed it. And so with great direction from Nikolai, Joanna's performances totally take what we've written and make it even more amazing. I mean, just really amazing. So thank you, Joanna.
Yeah, she is absolutely brilliant. I highly recommend her to listen to her music that she does, and she's a great artist. Now, ironically, the next movie I'm gonna play is called Two Shady Guys. That's a movie of mine which doesn't have vocals, but the next one will. Right. So the fact that it doesn't have vocal in it brings us to an interesting, I think, topic. Now, the how we apply the vocal in our cues. So the music itself, maybe not the last cue very much, but in general, the music tends to be intense at times, and which is not always great for the gameplay. And when you add an intense vocal, that's like Joanna's, it can just add to the intensity. So what we've decided to do is to have the first play to apply it to the game in a way that the first loop or the first play is has Joanna's vocals, and then the next two following that, they don't. Those are just instrumental loops, and then after that, again, the vocal loop happens.
Yeah, I think that was a good decision too in terms of implementation, so that the vocal is not so present that it's, after you hear it and it sets the mood, it's not sort of losing your focus, because her vocals are so interesting. Yeah, and also I think it's worth talking about how we recorded this, because we did have the opportunity to use an orchestra, which we recorded in Macedonia. The budget was limited. We didn't have a ton of money, but we had enough to go to Macedonia, which is an excellent place to record on a low budget. So we did, and they did a great job. We were both listening remotely, you in Warsaw and I in LA, and they played really, really well. And then those mixes or those recordings were sent to our recording engineer, who he's someone that you introduced me to.
Yeah, Steve Kempster. He's my mixer, so to speak, but not only mine, of course. But he's an excellent guy, an excellent engineer, and he's here in LA. And while I was in Warsaw, Gary was able to supervise the mixing process, and it came out very well, as always.
Yeah.
Now, we have two more movies. The next one is Harbor by Gary.
And here a little more of the 12-tone. A little more of a 12-tone vibe here.
So that was Schoenberg's style, definitely. And one last one is my cue, heavily inspired by Herman, called The Tower, which happens towards the end of the game.
Schreiben, drucken, senden, vorbereit. Der wird dir sagt, gibt alles.
All right. And that's pretty much
By the way,
it.
Mick, I love that cue, Mick.
Oh man, thank you so much.
And that and the tower is your goal. You really are in the game. The tower is where you want to prevent your friend from getting executed, et cetera, et cetera. So that is sort of the dramatic crest of peak of your experience playing Metamorphosis.
I think it would be a good idea to summarize our experience and this talk that we right now have. That it's nice, it's good to try things from time to time and be experimental. And I think it's a bit easier with smaller games than the AAA projects, but you never know. It's always worth a try. Especially that with games you have usually you have deadlines far ahead into the future. Right. So thank you very much for being with us here. And Gary, you want to add something?
Yeah, it just, you don't always get to be as creative as this. And we had a developer who made a very unique and interesting game, and it allowed us to be very, very creative with it. And they were very open to whatever we produced. Their notes were minimal. They really dug it. So when you get these opportunities, it's really, really special. And we, obviously delighted not only to have this opportunity to do GDC, but we did win the SCL award for best original score for a video game, and we're nominated for Gang Awards and ASCAP Awards, et cetera. So thank you all for
was
attending.
worth it.
Yeah, thank you all for attending. And I think we're going to have a little time for questions in a moment or so.
All right, thanks.